So welcome to the second episode of Lamplight Social Records TV podcast thing. Today our special guests are Matthew Bourne and Nika Ticciati. Ticciati. I've been practicing that for the last 5 minutes. Ticciati.
I think that was noble.
And do you want to introduce yourselves?
I'm Matthew Bourne.
I am also Matthew Bourne.
And I am Matthew Bourne.
I'm honoured.
Firstly, let's start by telling everyone we have a gig on the 30th of May. It's part of Leeds Jazz Festival and it's at Sela Bar, and we have two bands playing. One is with myself, Matthew Bourne. Are you bringing your rhodes?
No.
No, not bringing your
I don't
rhodes.
own it anymore. Glenn Leach owns that.
Oh no.
No, I have one. I have a 54, but no.
Okay.
No, I think I'll bring.
Harpsichord?
I'm gonna use the Sela's Nord and a keyboard that my mum bought me when I was 15. I've used it before,
Yes,
and I enjoyed that combination. So that in my head, that's what I'm going to be using. That's the palette. Is that all right with you?
That's excellent.
Okay,
That's
good.
Yeah. We can go into more detail about that later. Dave Kane on double bass and Emil Karlsen on drums. And Nika is playing with the Harvey Parkin-Christie quartet.
Yes, indeed.
And do you want to tell us a bit about that band?
Sure can do. The group's comprised of, I'm going to be playing amplified bass guitar. It's Harvey Parkin-Christie on tenor saxophone, Oliver Pritchard-Jones on soprano saxophone. It's a double-barreled horn section. And Teruki Chan on the drum set. It's a set of music either inspired by or borrowing from our shared love of Eastern European music. So it's got some sort of Soviet pop influence, some sort of Yiddish influence as well. We're doing a few Barry Sisters tunes. It's going to be pretty righteous, I think. Yeah. And sort of melding that with the, the very noble European avant-garde stuff we like as well.
So Matt, tell us more about this keyboard instrument that was given to you when you were 15.
It is a Yamaha PSR 80, and I've refused to throw it away over the years, partly because of its sentimental value, I suppose, even though I didn't envisage ever using it again. Then last year I put it in the garage. I thought I'll sell it at a car boot. Then me and Chris Sharkey and Luke Redden-Williams have been doing a little get-together every month or so called Green Bullets. And one of those recordings, we decided to use bad gear, just like rubbish gear. So I thought, hey, well, I've got this keyboard. So I got it out of the garage and plugged it in. It's got a few broken keys. I took it to the session, and actually it was kind of like a secret weapon we didn't know existed. Because once you plug it in properly, and put it through your phones, in that context with those two, it suddenly sounds a bit special. But it's also got very advanced sequencing capabilities for a home, what is essentially a home keyboard. And I was just going to sell it at the car boot. Chris said, well, you should check, it might be worth something. And I did, and it is worth something. So I just ordered some new replacement keys. So I'm probably going to do a solo record on just that keyboard. But last time we played Sela, I used it, detuned it slightly with the Nord at Sela. It kind of, I don't know, it's a kind of another usefulness, if you like. But I thought, actually, I'm not going to sell this at all. I'm just going to keep it. Might make it my main instrument for the next couple of years. I don't know. So yeah, that's the story behind that keyboard.
Nice. And you two have done a harpsichord trio record as well with Glenn Leach. When's that out?
Well, that's a good question. Again, Chris Sharkey recorded it. He sent over two tracks that he's managed to actually sit through and do a mix of, because it's quite an aggressive sound world at the best of times. He's done 2, and I sent those 2 to Martin Archer, who I'd told him that we were doing it, and so he was keen to hear the results. So I sent him those, and he's very keen to release that and any other material that comes from it. He's even come up with the title, which is he would like to call it Arior. And it's related to Cage, but he hasn't told us why. We've got to guess that. So hopefully a discus release is forthcoming from that. But I've only heard, well, those 2 tracks are the only things that I can remember from the session, but they seem really strangely coherent. But I don't remember much about the session. Do you?
Not particularly. I remember mostly the feeling of like that bizarre disconnect that sets in when you're a pianist sat at something that shares the interface but not any of the consequences of playing a piano. So, and then I remember, the only thing I really remember in any particular clarity was on the first improvisation, I thought it would be really funny to use my phone as a slide on the strings of the harpsichord, because it was using a pint-sized, space computer as a block of metal to affect a bunch of strings on a harpsichord, and it was inherently lower down in that chain of being. And I thought that was quite funny. I think beyond that, it's all a bit hazy. The recordings are pummeling, though. We're on some dark, evil shit that day.
Yeah, it sounds like 3 antique Swiss clocks working in perfect synchronization, but they're all out of time.
Nice. And I guess for those who have never tried improvising on a harpsichord
For the
instrument,
uninitiated, yeah.
What are the challenges when it comes to, or the constraints or the inspirations behind these instruments?
The challenges of 3 people playing at the same time, or playing 3 harpsichords?
It shares a lot with because the double piano, even like the piano duo format for improvising, is really quite hostile. It's quite a bizarre space to live in. And that, with 3 pianos, would have been difficult anyway. But then you add the stubbornness of the instrument.
Yeah,
It's quite an unyielding set of objects. Kind of felt, I don't know, it feels bizarrely belligerent.
the 2 piano combos it's not unusual, but it's rare because it's not commonplace to have 2 pianos in a lot of venues that aren't concert halls or whatever. So there's that. It's familiar, yet it's not that common. Then for harpsichords, acoustically the sound is a lot softer, but more percussive. But the moment you then mic it up, it becomes more intense and violent than you could get out of a piano.
We were saying on the
so
day,
it's so strange.
There was a real bizarre disconnect to the experience of actually playing them, and then when we listened back to it, and it was just like a very angry swarm of clockwork bees.
Yeah.
And sort of in the room, we were confronted with sort of like a comparatively wimpy sound in a way that we were responding to with intensity, but
yeah, which makes I guess any section that is really aggressive and full on triple because of it, because we're trying to attack them not like they're a piano, but because they're all broken and in various states of disrepair.
Much more broken when we finished, I noticed.
Yeah, there's like an intensity that sets in that's I don't know, driven by, you just want to smash the fucking things up because it's so frustrating to play.
Very combative after a while.
Yeah.
It was really exciting though. I think that thing of, because you lose pressure sensitivity, you've got a reduced range. It loses inherently a lot of I guess we'd call it expressiveness. It's like there's a real feeling that the instrument's very stubborn. and has very little time for what you might want from it. So it's quite hard almost not to get into quite an aggressive place with it. But also, if you're coming at it specifically as a pianist, I think you feel so fine-tuned to all the things that cease to be what you expect. Consequences are very different for very familiar actions. But then, I don't know. I think also there's the thing of when you're forced to confront the way a building, an instrument's built, and we were very aware of it, I think, as well, because of, you know, them being so broken down. And like the physicality of what that object is, that sort of like pile of metal and wood. It feels so much less final than a piano, because it's just more flimsily built, I guess.
Yeah.
So there's also that thing of like, the breakability feels very here whilst you're playing. Especially when you hit a note really fucking hard and it's just not any louder at all. And you just hear this massive clonk of wood, you know. I don't know. It's a really bizarre space.
Yeah, they sounded a lot different after we'd done it.
Yeah.
There were aspects that were they were trashed even more. It didn't prevent people from buying them, though, because they were given to me by Leeds Conservatoire, and after signing a memorandum of understanding that these were definitely not, they weren't going to regret either throwing them into a skip or giving them to somebody. But maybe I shouldn't say this on tape. But I was assured that they were worth nothing, and they'd done all their research, and that no harpsichord maker or repairer was interested in them, in paying money for them. Yet I sold all three of them for a total of 900 quid to people on eBay, of which I will be giving Chris Sharkey for doing all the mix work. So
and you said we wouldn't.
I've
make any
spent the
money,
money,
off that
but I'll spend it back on So yeah. So that the moral of the story is, Leeds Conservatoire, don't think the equipment's worth nothing, because you can get 900 quid, and then that might subsidise some really, really nicely cooked fresh food in the bar for a couple of weeks, maybe.
And be wary of the.
Anyway, let's not get into that.
Be wary of the shrewd salesmen you hire under the guise of being very austere improvising pianists, for they may secretly be in it solely to take all of your broken gear.
I got offered a clavichord as well recently.
Taylor's all his time.
Is there a clavichord album coming as well?
I hope not. Well, there's one at my school as well, which is a smaller version of the one they've got. And I went to my school last year, and it was lying on the floor of one of the music rooms. I thought, hey, that's my old Head of Music's clavichord that was never played, and it's still not being. It's got no legs. It's knackered. So I asked them if I could give them some money for it, because the organ needs restoring. So at most I was going to offer 300 quid. So all they did, I think, is go online, see the one that's for sale for £2,000 on eBay that no one's bought. Otherwise, it's not really worth that. Otherwise, it wouldn't be on eBay, would it? And they said, yeah, we'll sell it to you for £2,000. So I just said, yeah, but good luck with that. I bet it's still there. I should have just taken it. I'm going back there in 2 weeks, so I'm just going to nick it. I think they'll know who's nicked it, though. No one's going to miss it. So yeah, maybe there's a third clavichord that can be sourced from somewhere. We can do the same thing. Although
the world's quietest trio recording ever.
Yeah, but if we apply the same level of impulsive aggression to the clavichord, the session will only last about 5 minutes, because we'll break them in no time.
It'll be a good study in decay.
But the clavichord is a much more. I've got time for the clavichord, because there's some pieces written by Herbert Howells for it called Lambert's clavichord and Howell's clavichord, which are little kind of. I don't know. The titles they're dedicated to various English composers and friends of his.
Right.
So there's one called Finzi's Rest, Goff's Fireside, and they're really quaint. They're kind of Tudor style pieces, but they've got this very modern harmony within them, which makes them very, very ancient but very kind of modern at the same time. They're really great. So I'd always loved the idea of having a clavichord to play those on, because you can play them on piano, those pieces, but they sound so dull and boring after having listened to a really nice recording of them on the clavichord. But yeah, acoustically, it's incredibly quiet. And so the technique and everything that you have to adopt is totally different to the piano.
I felt overwhelmingly in the few times I've interacted with clavichords that they were quite wretched little instruments.
Yeah.
But then, I don't know, I didn't really give them much time to win me over.
Anyway, this is really far away from this gig.
Doesn't matter.
And the focus of your podcast.
It's
We're
very
just talking
interesting.
like in a really dry way about instruments that we don't like.
And then you also mentioned that you got hold of some scores. Like you showed me one for, was it viola and 4 hands or something?
Yeah, it's for
Recently?
harpsichord, viola, 4 hands.
Yeah.
It's one harpsichord player and 2 viola players playing the same viola.
Yeah.
It's possibly the only... Yeah, it's the only piece of... It was because I bought a Sam Raffling transcription of the Rite of Spring solo piano, which Dick Rinatamian premiered in 1989 or something. It's a really good transcription of it. Anyway, from the same shop, from this guy in Detroit, he got these other sections to his website, which he'd... Yeah, some kind of very old songs from the 1920s and 30s. And his categories were quite interesting, and I think one of them was something like curios. So I had a look through those. And yeah, there it was. It was, piece for harpsichord and viola 4 hands. So I thought I would get it. It was $7. So I couldn't not get that as well. So he's got quite an interesting website, that guy. So yeah, I mean, that's really quite an extreme example of weird scores. But I mean, last year, a couple of years ago, I discovered the music of a guy called William Baines, who was from Homefirth originally, and he was only 22 when he died, and he'd written a piano concerto, some symphonies, and a massive amount of solo piano music that's really individual in character. Some of the harmony is really quite out for the time. And his own life story is tragic. Yeah, he basically died of an illness he'd picked up in the trenches, and it's really sad, like a really sad little story, but his music is really individual, really unique. And it's weird because I'm always into particularly British piano music by underdog composers like Cyril Scott or Sarabji, Frank Bridge. Let me think. They're all gonna disappear from my head as I try to describe them. Not Bax, not John Ireland, not Benjamin Britten. It's the people before that. It's the unfashionable people. E.J. Murren, Finzi. Or they didn't really write that much for the piano, but harmonically he's quite interesting. So there's this whole world of composers. So he fits into that. This Baines guy fits into that set of composers also. There's an Oxfam Books in Skipton, and they have all of this stuff. So every time I go to Skipton, I always go in there. They always have something. It's weird. I think they've been given a very good collection, and they're just siphoning it out every time I come and buy that stuff. They just put more of it out. But I haven't had I don't know. There's a bit of me that wants to just look in their back room. But that's greedy, and there wouldn't be enough for anybody else who just happened across it as well. So, but yeah, I've got a thing for that. I've got a thing for compositions that are not well known, or composers that aren't well known, and who are the underdog, and that's the music I'm interested in the most.
And do you kind of actively get inspired by that and incorporate it into your own improvisation and composition, or is it just something you're really interested in and then subconsciously it might feed into it?
It's always worked on lots of levels. There's the level of wanting to play the piece that I've heard, that I've enjoyed, so I could learn it as a classical piece. Then there's the analytical part, which is looking at the construction of a particular chord or passage, or why that works. I'm thinking, like, what's going on here? And then I try and adapt that myself and try and remember it in an intuitive way. So kind of analysing it in a very, in a traditional way, and thinking, why does this work? Oh, it's that triad or this interval across that over that. And then develop my own way of trying to remember that, and then use that improvisationally as well. So if I think, I really like this chord, I'm going to try and work that kind of harmony into something, or the way the way dissonance is used, or the way that resolution can occur from a compositional point of view, and then trying to, I don't know, put that in your mind somewhere, so it may inform something that you do later. Or if you run out of ideas, you can go, I'm just going to play that sequence of chords that I've kind of nicked from this composition, albeit intuitively, not repeating it verbatim. But there is a sense of kind of structure and engagement with some composed material that somebody else has put a lot of thought into, that is informing your language as an improviser. I'm quite interested in that. Because if someone has said, I really like this part and this section, this, that, and the other, I'll just say, yeah, I nicked that idea from so-and-so. So hopefully then they might be inspired to go and check out the work of that composer or artist or that piece and enjoy it for themselves, So, that's generally how I've tended to go about things. It's just a bit odd and weird, but...
No, I think everyone does that to a certain extent, don't they? And no one can truly come up with something brand new because it's impossible. And,
you've just got to
some
spread
people
the love.
Some people hide it more than others, I guess.
Yeah,
there's that famous Einstein quote, isn't there? That the secret to creativity is hiding your sources, or something like that.
Well, like Zorn will constantly name check everyone he's been inspired by in a really transparent, postmodern way, and very much influenced by his way of going about things in that respect. And I just think, actually, it's Corigliano said it. John Corigliano said that it was the responsibility of an artist working today, I mean, he wrote this in the 90s, to use whatever means of communication possible to make himself understood to others. And of course, there are people that would totally disagree with that and not roll with that at all. But for some reason, I like the idea of, if somebody comes across your work and it's clearly been informed by the work of others, I don't see why you should try and hide it. I think it's good to be transparent because, as I say, it will inspire other people to also, maybe one day they'll come across something of yours and they might talk about you. Well, yeah. When you're like a has-been and you're in your 60s and no one gives a shit because we haven't got youth on our side anymore, you can rely on somebody beating a path to your door and saying, tell me about that. And you'll be like, oh yeah, of course. When everybody starts dying and you start losing your friends, you become lonely. And, these are the things that might eventually happen. You got to think about that when you're like rattling around in your house with the wind blowing around it. And like, I could die here alone. I'm going to be alone one day. My parents are going to die. I'm going to have to sit on my own and think about that. So actually all you've got is... Sorry, I'm going off on a massive tangent. But I just think community is really important. It's like community is the thing I'm trying to bang on about. It's like establishing a community of people that care about each other, care about the music that each other are making. Whether the inspiration is from people that are dead or alive, it doesn't matter. It's like if you get into the habit of using or taking inspiration from someone or something, it doesn't matter what it is. It's like you can just talk about that and announce it in some way, not in any grand way. It doesn't have to be that, but it's all about who you. I don't know. Yeah. I'm just going to stop.
Yeah.
I've lost it.
That's really beautiful anyway. And it actually is what I kind of experienced straight away when moving to Leeds. When I grew up in Warrington, but I moved to Leeds to study at the Conservatoire. And there was you and Dave Kane and Christoph de Besnak all on the faculty there. And I immediately kind of felt part of the scene, and we would form these projects with the help of you guys, and then do support slots, and that because you were talking about community, and it just kind of led me onto this, and 15 years later, now I'm teaching at college, and there seems to be another wave of really interesting musicians coming up, like this guy. And I'm actually blown away by the amount of music that you've already released in your second year at uni. I was listening to the one you did with Teruki the other day, the kind of really aggressive punk rock one.
Is that music to burn cop cars to?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's a good
Brilliant.
story attached to that one.
Yeah.
It was a very arbitrary decision that we'd pick a weekend and we wouldn't eat or sleep for 24 hours, which doesn't seem like all that long a time until you do it. And then we had a room booked for 4 hours. Do I need to shut up?
We're just going to do a little camera re-record button because it runs out after 25 minutes.
Gotcha.
But yeah, we'll pick up that.
Hold that thought.
I'll hold the pose as well.
Yeah, like Police Squad style.
Yeah, so what was the title of that album again?
Music to burn cop cars too.
And tell us more about the story behind this album.
We decided somewhat arbitrarily to deprive ourselves of food and sleep for 24 hours, which is fairly unremarkable to some, but we're very whiny. So it was quite an arduous... Oh, we also didn't leave my kitchen for like most of it as well. So there was an element of sort of psychological torture going on. I think we listened to Ling Chi, the Naked City album,
Yes.
and the entire Clowncore discography.
Sorry, can you move the microphone?
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
Listened to the whole Clowncore discography. A lot of other...
Oh, is that Sam Gendel and...
Sam Gendel and Lewis Cole.
Yeah.
Big fan of that cluster of people. Music for saxophone and bass guitar is a personal favorite. But,
I love that album.
I tried to rip that off so hard so many times. Had to stop in the end. I was making myself unwell. But yeah, we did that, and then we emerged sort of fairly unhappy. And then we had a room booked for 4 hours the next day, and we were like, we'll do a record in 4 hours, and whatever it is, and that's that. And the goal was kind of just to make something that we'd both really enjoy and laugh at a lot. And Teruki got very sick of me saying afterwards, you know, in a very needlessly austere way, as I'm prone to. I was just like, you do realize this is actually like a really good bit of art, because we went in deciding to make something that would really make us like chuckle like idiots. And it's just a whole bunch of nonsensical surrealist bollocks that we really enjoyed playing. And then he was like, yeah, shut up, I'm gonna get fish and chips. But you know, it was a very nice time. One of the quicker turnovers in my discography.
Yeah, we actually, me and my friend Tim Horn and Luke Redden-Williams, we did a similar kind of thing when we were at college, and it got put on MySpace, but then MySpace disappeared, and none of us have got the recordings backed up.
Oh man, no!
And so this quartet that you're doing with Harvey on the 30th, tell us a bit more about that, because you've got some, is it Eastern European influences? Or?
Yeah, me and Harvey both share quite a love for like the Slavic melodic and harmonic palette, and I'm half Russian, so I've got my mum was in the USSR and all of that. So when I was growing up, I watched a lot of slightly bizarre and consistently unsubtitled Soviet cartoons and things. So a lot of those sounds are very instinctive. But also we both have quite a lot of love for the sort of sound of like Yiddish music. We both, it turned out, being into the Barry Sisters independently of each other for a while, which was bizarre. But yeah, the sort of aim of that project is to sort of celebrate that music without really claiming to have any real part of it. We're both quite wary of the tendency in certain circles to sort of take the sheen of a certain style and sort of claim participation. But we're really sort of paying tribute to it and saying this is something we love more than trying to sort of make it ours, really. But it's sort of meshing that with a love of the sort of you know, the avant-garde and the abstract improvised space, but also just our love of songs and not prioritizing that sort of brutalist inaccessibility thing, you know. And also just it's funny you talk about community. I think about it a lot at the minute, and the communal feeling of like a group playing, and there not really being an emphasis on individualism, but you know, the sort of the fifth person in a quartet that's created by four people being really defiantly themselves. You know, there's a really lovely sense of togetherness and community and sort of directionless compassion in a way that I sort of aspire to in a day-to-day way in a lot of that music, which I find really, I don't know, enviable.
Beautiful.
Isn't it just?
Are you planning on staying in Leeds after you graduate?
For a bit at least, yeah. Leeds,
because there was a track on that album that said, "If I'm still in Leeds by the time I'm 40,
I'm gonna kill myself."
myself."
Yeah. I don't know. We've got quite a bizarre relationship with Leeds, because it's one of those things where we so love the people in it, and we so love some of the spaces in it, but our aspirations might be elsewhere. But you know, we've got till we're 40. You know, that's just under a quarter of a century even. You know, we can poodle around a bit. I'm gonna hang around a bit for sure. I quite like I don't know. I quite like the people and the culture. You know, it's really bizarre. I'm not wholly sure what causes it. I'm sure there's something very obvious I'm not thinking of. But there's a tendency when people who are of quite dense being end up in Leeds, they tend to be really easy to find, and they tend also to be quite actively associated with all the other people of dense being that I like to watch play and listen to and stuff. It's like all the little clusters of, there's like, you know, you and Emil and Dave and Matt, who sort of all have like a cluster within the space, even if it's not, you know, your exclusive base of operations. And then, you know, there's Fergus Quill and you know, and
Tight Lines guys.
Yeah, all the Tight Lines guys, you know, Will Aiken and Theo Goss and that lot. And you know, there's sort of pretty much all the people who are in Cataclysm have sort of further extensions, so all of whom are people I really love and all of that. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's a very similar thing that happens, I guess.
Matt, what have you something I wondered if you'd noticed any kind of patterns with the Leeds scene, like the Leeds jazz scenes over the years. I wondered if you had any observations or like.
I think generally, yeah, there's always been every few years there's a set of, or there's an influx of people that make their own scene. I'm sure it happens in, you know, most places that have a educational centre by default. But for some reason, Leeds, yeah, I don't know. I mean, when we did the whole Lima collected Leeds Improvised Music Ensemble Association, it was really that we were all putting on our own gigs and doing things around the city that we decided to unify in that way. Then, you know, running, I guess, running concurrently with that was Johnny Tomlinson and Tommy Evans. They had their own little gig called The Spin-Off. So that was also another separate little scene that sort of overlapped. Then there was, you know, Cat Daniels and Yost, and you go, what was that label called? Big Hungry. What was that label that who started? Was it you guys who started that?
What, with Craig Scott and
yeah,
was it Tom Lumley or
yeah,
what's his name?
Anyway,
I don't, they had a band called Def Cunt, right? And
yeah,
they were a bit older than us, but
okay, yeah.
Um,
So there was some there was some overlap for a number of years, and then there seemed to be nothing. And then, yeah, I guess Glenn Leach's year, they seemed to kind of spearhead another, or even before them, like the Slow Rorish guys and the Tight Lines. So, yeah, there seemed to be a gap, and then things have just reappeared and emerged. So that, again, there's these overlapping circles of people that are all, it's great. It's like everyone's doing their own thing and supporting one another. So I mean, that's a very, I guess, a gross oversimplification of the way I see things. I haven't actually lived in Leeds for years, for like 10 years. But I think the draw for Leeds, for us, or for me particularly, and at the time, was that we didn't have to go to London to live and to make the music we wanted to make. In fact, going to London would have prevented us from doing it with the freedom that we had to do it up here. Not least financially speaking, because we could all get jobs as supply teachers and earn enough money to pay the rent, and then go and get wrecked in town, and then meet up and play music of the sort that we wanted to make anytime we want, without any kind of repercussion. There wasn't any pressure to earn money through doing unnecessary function gigs or, that sort of thing. So it was very much a conscious choice to stay where we were, because we're like, well, we already have what we need here, so let's just do that and just see what happens. And I think, there was also a comical, like, fuck London, actually, fuck London. Why do we need to move to London? Fuck off. Which is a bit of a, we always joked about that. It was like, yeah, this is part of like the Fuck London festival. Because it was like everything happened in London. Everything was always about London. It was so centric to London and all the rest of it. So there was a bit of kind of joshing around. But at that time, when we were doing our own music up here, we'd meet people down in London like Andrew Plummer, Alex Bonney, and we'd make friends with all those guys down there. So the ability to just drive down and back, or do whatever, and then put gigs of those guys on up here. Actually, the scene is bigger than Leeds anyway, so you could kind of live anywhere and be part of the scene or that community of people wherever you are. So Leeds isn't so far from London, really. No. And then putting it into perspective, if you went to the States, the idea of driving to wherever to do a gig long distance is, I know everything's relative, but I think all you have to do is make friends with some people in London and then drive up and down a couple of times. And it's a 4-hour drive, but it's still not really that far to make the connection. So I don't know. That's I guess the line that we took was just to stick around here, because we had that freedom, that musical freedom in particular, without financial, the worry of paying for the rent and being in a big city where it was really hard to get from one end of it to the other. Whereas Leeds is geographically very small, and so I guess it was easy. Or maybe we were lazy. Maybe I was, there's that. I think there was this idea that if you went to London, you'd get your ass kicked. And I very much felt that I already know what I need to do to kick my own ass. Or I need London or the pressure of some other people to do that. I can already do that myself. So I think there was very much that as well that was at play, personally. But Leeds, I think, has always had this great scene and this great spirit of adventure and experimenting, and I don't know why. It's just one of those things. The northern sound. Who knows? Yeah.
And you live in Keighley now.
Yeah.
And you've got this amazing house on a mountain. And you've recently built a studio as well.
Yeah.
I've been, and it's amazing. Is it going to be available to the public at any point? Or
free to those who can afford it. Very expensive to those who can't. So yes, it is, in short. That's kind of what I mean. And it's not advertised, but anyone is welcome to come and make music there. And so it's just about got used to it. Still a few little things that need to be done, but it's perfectly usable as a rehearsal space or to record. whatever you like there. Having a green roof put on there this year. So there'll be 8 tons of soil, which will act as a very good insulator and mass to prevent any sound vibration. It's mainly sound going out that I'm more concerned about than the sounds coming in.
Right.
So it's for the sake of my neighbours. So if I get Rejection Ops, which is that noise project by Colin Sutton, that drummer, Josh, is one of the loudest drummers I've ever... He's the only person who's ever inspired a knock at my front door to say, "Can you play a bit more quietly, please?" And so they came over in lockdown, and I've recorded lots of stuff in my front room, like the Shiver album with Yoast. I've had drummers playing there a lot. Never any problem. This guy comes, bang, bang, bang. Within 10 to 15 minutes, there was a knock at the door. So I'm very concerned. I mean, he would be the test, actually. So I think once the roof is covered in soil, I want to do a bit of a test and get them round and see if... and just walk around to the other side and just see if I can hear it. Or stand on the roof and see how much I can hear.
Maybe that'd be a good profession for him, going around and testing.
Yeah, exactly.
studios.
Exactly. So yeah, no, it's in short, it's ready to use by anybody who would like to negotiate a daily fee.
Yeah.
No, honestly, yeah.
And it's got beautiful views, massive windows,
It does.
little kitchen.
Yeah.
How's it been having your own studio underneath your house, like with a grand piano? And do you feel like it's affected the kind of music that you're making, or?
Yeah, I still get used to it because previously the piano's in my front room, so I just made everything in my front room. So there's a very casual and fluid relationship between where you'd sit and relax or listen to music and eat and cook, and the piano just being within almost arm's reach of all of those things, to the formalization of those things being in a separate space. So the formal act of going down the stairs into a very separate space means that there's nothing else to do other than to sit and make music. So given that I make most of my music by accident or off the back of doing work for other people or assignments, the purposefulness of walking into a dedicated space is taken a bit of getting used to, because I'm generally quite lazy when it comes to making my own work. So the fact that I've spent a lot of money building a dedicated space to go and make music that's going to demand a very different way of going about making music is a bit of a gamble, actually. So for the duration of the build, I didn't make any music because there were at least 5 or 6 people on site every day for months and months and months. So for about 12 months. So even when they pack up and go home at the end of the night, there was this very scarring, disjointed, discombobulating effect on the house, essentially. So it was it's taken me quite a long time to get used to that space. I think for somebody coming in from the outside, it's like, wow, the space is great, and you've got this and you've got that. But for me, I went through quite a dark period of thinking that none of it had been worth it, and I really didn't like it at all, and I wish I'd never done it, and I wish I'd never spent any of the money doing it, because it was a complete waste of time, because I don't feel happy or at home in it whatsoever. So so when it was finished, in inverted commas, I didn't really know what to do with it. I didn't want anybody else to go in there, didn't want to hire it out. It was very odd. It's just a very odd feeling. And I'm only really just turning that corner now and thinking, well, actually I really like it in here. But it's odd that it does feel totally disconnected from the house. So I got to learn this habit now of, because for all my life I've had a piano in my front room, or within the same space where I live. So it very much is an extension of a casual way of navigating a space, a home space. So now that it's separate, which is the reality for a lot of people that have studios, they have to travel. Like we were talking about Matt Calvert earlier. Matt's got a space that's not anywhere near his home. I think for a lot of people, that disconnect is actually the norm. Whereas for me, it's not. It feels really formal and strange. And when I step into the studio, I have to get really serious about making music. And then I just sit there and think, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what to do. Am I serious about making music? So I haven't learned that yet. I'm still learning it. So it feels still odd. It's fresh. I don't regret doing it now, though. I'm past that.
Yeah.
Past the point of thinking it was a complete waste of time. Kind of. It's done, so now I have to live with it. But yeah, I think I'd rather have had the vision and pushed ahead and done it and gone through all that than not done it, than just look outside at a shit garage and some earth and think, oh yeah, I'll get round to doing that studio one day. Yeah, because I spent long enough doing that. And so I think the lockdown helped in that I widened my drive, I bought a JCB, I got very hands-on with everything. And had that not happened, it would have meant that the build couldn't have happened because the drive wasn't physically wide enough for a lot of things to get down. So yeah, it's all just happened by accident in a purposeful way. So yeah, that's it.
Interesting.
Because it's really interesting, the recording in the building that you live in, because I'm a child of post-2000, so all music making is done in your bedroom,
Yeah.
by and large. I've made quite a lot of albums in places where I sleep, and it's really interesting because I've noticed as my music's taken on the more organic quality that I've been trying to reach without a lot of success until recently. It takes on, like my first solo album under the new name is quite like, it feels to me like a documenting of like the dimensions of the room in which it was made, and also the implications of a lot of the objects within it, and also all of the mundane aspects of having a room that you sleep in and do a lot of being between things in. But I guess I'm curious, like, because your studio's still attached to your house, even if it is a separate space and there is that sort of ideological separation, like, I don't know, do you find your music feels less almost tied to the location in which it's made now? Or I don't know. Is there a warping, I guess?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I suppose the music that I end up making comes about as a part of a process that I think would happen in any space. So, yeah, I guess the difference in the space that now happens in is the thing that I have to get my head around, I suppose. So I have to find. But I would say that the only thing that's common to it, the only thing that doesn't change, I think the space doesn't make any difference. But the only thing, what is common to is the time that I end up pressing record and making is usually at twilight. It's usually very, very late, or late, or certainly, yeah, when everything is quiet outside and no one's really calling you or messaging you. It's that calm bit of the day going towards midnight where, for some reason, everything descends then, or you can access certain things that you can't at the beginning of the day. But yeah, doing it in that space is quite unusual, because even upstairs, like where I did most of all my other albums, still have this amazing view in these windows. The idea that you'd be sitting and looking out the view while making it is actually nonsense, because most of the time it's dark and it was raining, I can't see anything, and most of the time I've got my head down at the piano. And then Moog Memory I recorded just like looking at my fire and like the brick wall. And I find myself doing that now, I just started recording more Moog pieces. And the piano sort of faces the view, but the Moog is set up looking at like a brick wall and some stainless steel kitchen units and a ladder that I can't be bothered to put away. So, yeah, I don't know how much is different. I think it's still the descent. I think it's getting used to the fact that, yeah, it's like learning. The house has got more legs, it's got more reach, and it still feels weird. Sometimes when you walk from the studio space up into the main room, and then you walk through the main room to a bedroom or something, sometimes I do that and think, wow, this house is actually really big. It's actually really enormous. And that space feels really, really separate. So, I don't know. I think it is good when other people come into the space and use it. And it changes the energy in the room, in the house. It kind of gives it a sense of purpose. I think, doing things alone is all well and good. But, again, you need people in your life to come and help you make music, even when you do sit down on your own. Music is a product of human relationships, and I think if the idea that you can sit and make it alone in your cell is kind of a fiction in a way. It doesn't really paint that picture of the significant people in your life. Yeah, place is one thing, but I think no matter where you go, wherever the location, the music is still the result of who you're connected to. So I don't know if that's a good answer to the question. Veered off slightly, but
I enjoyed it.
Good. I'm glad.
You mentioned time of day having an effect.
Yeah.
I find that if I start making music after dinner time, I just will be still there at 5 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
I just can't stop.
Wow.
And then I get in bed and I'm like, no, like, can't sleep. So I try and get it done in the morning now, when I can.
Well, I mean, if the weather's like this, I don't know how I personally wouldn't be able to do it at all. You'd be like, oh yeah, look, it's sunny, and there's a million jobs I need to do outside, so I'd go and do that. But being stuck in the studio when it's sunny would be, I don't know. I don't know how anybody else feels about. That's quite an interesting
yeah, well,
question,
I get the guilt as well. It's like, it's a nice day and I'm inside.
Well, it's interesting because I used to do all of my recording late at night. I did the entirety of the first album I ever released when I was 16. I recorded the entirety of that between the hours of about 11 and 5 at night. But it's an awful album, so don't use that as a secret to success. Fucking rotten album. But lately I've been trying to do it before anything happens, to sort of have it come straight from dreamfulness, and that's sort of the shape my music's taken on recently. But I think it's interesting because I think the time of day thing is something you could psychoanalyze for years, but that thing of finding places that are still and wholly yours, not in a sense of like ownership, but more in a sense of nobody has the ability to disrupt whatever. Well,
Disrupt.
Very good.
Dude, that's word painting. That's really good songwriting technique, actually.
Just set yourself a timer.
Yeah, innit? And we're back. The sort of, I hesitate to call it sanctity, because people can be very precious about the way they make stuff, perhaps unduly. But whatever it is, that stillness and that undisrupted time is very, I don't know, it's the most fertile time fairly consistently for most people I know who make things. But it's also bizarre because, I don't know, you could go into it for ages about like, does the weight of things yet to be done inform the way you are before they're done? Does the weight of having just done something inform the way you are after? You know, would it be more productive to make music while you're doing the things that need to be done instead? You know, it's an odd set of separations. But then I've also noticed within myself the tendency for my days to feel like they happen either side of the point when I write something, which is an odd one to try and quantify on days when I don't write anything. So it's kind of a bizarre one. But then also the guilt thing, the sort of not being out and about thing never enters into it for me, I think, because of that. It's that thing of like the unbroken membrane of the time that's truly yours. When you're in that space, the meaning of a nice day is different, and the meaning of all these other things is different because you haven't had the time to recontextualize them by reintroducing yourself to a world of context. You have like the room that you're in and the experience you've just had as a person who's been asleep and is now awake and is probably thinking about things that they saw while they were sleeping. And all of these things are so uniquely yours and uniquely momentary as well. You won't have access to that space the second you leave that room for the first time. You sort of regain personhood after that. So it's a really odd, wholly unownable, yet completely ungiveawayable thing. The space and time in which you make music. But then the music you make was inherently of that space and time as well. Which, interestingly, she said the thing about it all being born from personal relationships. It's funny because I think people are very peripheral in the way that I make stuff when I make in that space. Because there is also making things communally and collaboratively, which is a very unsacred, unsanctified thing. You'll probably do it in a room that isn't particularly temple-like, and you probably do it in a way that isn't particularly monastic. But when I'm making music by myself, as I often do, when I'm making these solo records where I play everything and all of this, you know, there's a weight and there's a density to that space, the unbroken membrane, I guess. That was very long form.
I loved it. I guess I've seen too many winters.
Truly.
It gets to winter, I'm like, should have been outside more this summer. But just to, yeah. It's amazing, yeah, hearing you talk that deeply about things. Actually, it's really cool.
Hopefully, it's not too dull.
You can edit out all the self-indulgence
Hmm.
on. Yeah. Not yourself, but you know.
No, we can.
I think I was aware that. I'm aware of being really self-indulgent when I get asked questions about myself rather than asking the interviewer the questions. I think I've rambled on and on. Who cares? Who wants to know? So I hope, yeah. Anyway, yeah.
I think it's always interesting hearing other people's experience, and I learn so much just from hearing other people talk, and it's, yeah. So hopefully that they do too.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks so much for doing this.
It's our joint pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry about only having 2 microphones. I need to.
No, it's good. It's like
I will upgrade.
It's like recording with Elvis.
You've got another trio record ready to go, almost ready to go.
Yeah, it's finishing mixing as we speak. The wonderful Ben McDonald is mixing it. He's one of my favorite producers. With Teruki Chan and Fergus Quill.
Yeah.
A very odd little record that we made in another 4-hour record as well. It's good. I think there's 2 second takes on it and everything else is first take. It's a very happy day.
Amazing. And Matt, have you got anything coming out soon?
Yes, just another piano record on the Leaf label.
How dull. How pedestrian.
Exactly. It's piano, but there's some cello on it and some dulcitone. The record's called This Is Not For You. There's another thing.
Dave Walker telling me that when you made Moog Memory, you came into the shop and Dave Walker owns All Brass and Woodwind.
Oh, right.
The saxophone shop. I don't know why you were in there actually. But you just came in and you threw the vinyl at him and said, "You're going to hate this." And he was like, "Yeah, I probably will." And then he listened and he absolutely loved it. So
Yeah.
the title of your new one, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, it's for him. No, I've done that, and then actually a friend of his that he introduced me to off the back of that record, I made some work with him. He's an ex-derivatives trader and financial consultant. He's also a keen sailor. He loves data and he loves sailing. So he collated all the data from a marker buoy in the Solent. 8 days worth of data of Stormophilia. My friend PJ mapped that onto various software instruments and things. So there's like kind of an hour of continuous data that's sonified. It went through a few iterations, and then I recorded some stuff over that. So there's this thing coming. There's this album coming. It's called Chimet, which is Chichester meteorological beacon, whatever. So there's there's that too, which is a completely different thing. I just improvised over some bits of it. So it's a really interesting record, actually. You wouldn't think you could get an hour and 6 minutes worth of C minor to work as a concept, but it really does. That's it. I'm working on some new stuff with Keely Forsyth, which is just piano. It's actually it's turning out to be just a piano vocal record. She's overdubbing her vocals. A bit of cello here and there just to colour things, but it's really looking forward to doing more on that over the summer.
The next record coming out on my end, I've got a bit of a back catalogue. I'm going to do one a month the rest of the year, I think. Releasing, I'm not making them. All of these are done. But the next one that's coming out is an album entitled Alcoholic Cannibals Are the Worst, which I made in a week with Harry Suter. You know him?
Oh, yeah.
We got together every day and made a thing. A few days we made 2 things. I suppose because we're geniuses in that sense, untouchable, perfect people. But it's a very dizzying mess of sounds. It's got a sort of Mars Volta-y punk thing on it. It's got a lot of bizarre soundscapey electroacoustic music on it. It's got a house track on there. It's pretty good. Yeah, that's gonna be a trip.
Amazing. So that's all ready to go as well?
Yeah, that's coming out on June the 5th, before a slew of other things as well.